amazing artists. Today we'll be painting. First, get out your paintbrush colors and mixy. First, you need to do the paintbrush and then mixy.
Okay, hello amazing artists. So today we're going to be painting in the shadows and more details for our coat of arms project. So you really want to be thinking about mixing together your colors that you're using. You can see here, am adding black to brown because for my base colors, I just use a straight brown. And I want to add a little shadow to my compartment area of my artwork. So I'm mixing some black into some brown to get a darker brown so that I can add some shadow to my compartment. And you can see here that I'm literally just adding it to areas where the mountains overlap to make it look like there's a shadow on the mountains behind the front mountains. Now I could add a little bit to the front where there could potentially be a shadow from the ribbon onto the front mountains, but for now I'm going to keep it just to the back mountains. I also could mix together some white into the brown in order to add some highlights to the mountains if I had some areas that I thought would maybe have a little bit more snow on them. So you can see here I'm mixing white into brown. We already talked about that in the last video, so I'm not going to get too into it, but you can see I'm adding in a little bit of white just to add some highlights to some of my mountains. I also went back over all of my snow peaks on my mountains and added more white just so that they stood out a little bit more. However, you might want to consider that black is not always the right color for adding in your darkness. So you can see here I'm adding in some black to this magenta and it looks fine, but I kind of think it looks a little bit dirty. So I'm actually going to switch gears here and I'm going to grab some purple and mix it into my magenta because I really think that that's going to add a nicer highlight, a nicer shadow to my whole situation. And you can see I'm not adding the whole thing directly into my pink. I put it off to the side. I'm adding a little bit at a time because that really helps you control the amount that you get. So you're going to mix it in, and then you can see here I'm bringing it over and I'm just adding shadow where things are overlapping, okay? And I'm gonna add some here, and then I'm gonna add some darker shadow to that back fold because that's kind of further back in space. There would be less light hitting it, and that would make the whole thing, back in that area a darker shadow. So I've got one shadow here, and then I'm gonna have a darker shadow a little bit further back. And right here, you can see that I am doing the same thing. I used purple as my shadow color instead of black to create a darker version of this red for the heart. And I decided that the shadowy lines were too hard, so I actually just got a wet paintbrush and I'm kind of smearing the paint around to spread the shadow out a little bit more. So even though you're not mixing into your base color because they're dry, you can still thin out your shadowy colors to mix it in more seamlessly with your base colors. All right, and you can use these different alternative colors to mix shadows into your colors in all kinds of different directions. You can see I just use brown to mix into orange to give my orange a shadow rather than black because the black was too harsh. You could also mix purple into yellow if you were trying to add shadow to something yellow because that just looks better than black. Black just makes it end up looking like the yellow is dirty. So you can use all of these different techniques. If you're not sure, you can experiment. On my little snake on the top helmet, I'm going to use blue to add my shadow. I think that's going to look nicer with the green. You also, at the very end, once everything is done with shadow and dry, can add in some of these pearlescent metallic-y paints to give your coat of arms a shiny feeling. Now, you really only want to add these to areas that would be made out of metal. So I'm thinking like poles to flags, I'm thinking helmets, I'm thinking your shield. Probably not the rest of it, just the areas that would be metal. That way it gives it kind of a shiny effect that you would normally get off of metal. And you can see I am just going over my areas that I already painted with the same color. This is very thin paint. It is not going to cover anything up. You can see that I just got some white on top of the blue star on my Dallas Cowboys helmet. It did not cover it up. You really want to only go over the same colors that are there. So I'm adding this white to like my bee wings and my book, and I'm going to go over the rest of it with the same colors that are already there. So you can see here, fast forward, here's the finished product. I'm adding it into my purples, I'm adding it into my orange areas. I'm adding it in over my moon, and that's just all on the shield. I didn't add any in to my elephants or my flags or any of that. So this is all gonna have to dry before I can go back over anything else in Sharpie, but this pearlescent step is the very last step. You're done with all other painting when you move on to this.